My articles revolve around the German capitulation that culminated in victory in Europe. Though the dates used by the Allied powers are different, the French, English, and Americans celebrate Victory in Europe Day on 8 May, and the Russians of the former Soviet Union celebrate German capitulation on 9 May 1945. My articles are from the Washington Post and the New York Times. Both articles are entitled Victory in Europe. The articles would serve as a bolster to the understanding of the impact of the German surrender at the end of World War II. While there are other media that could serve as a means of conveying the information, seeing the pictures of New York City on Victory in Europe Day really paint a picture of celebration unparalleled in modern times. The unifying effect of a war that took such a devastating toll on a global scale has simply not been recreated since. The articles serve as a bold reminder that millions of people died in the name of the preservation of democracy, republicanism, and state autonomy in the face of genocide and National Socialism. The First World War had been a contest of arms unprecedented in human history, but the Second World War escalated that human and economic toll and raised it to the next order of magnitude. The Second World War was a level of destruction previously unheard of, and one that solidified the 20th century as the deadliest century in human history. While the argument has been made that humanity has become relatively more peaceful as time has progressed, the fact that there is an indisputably higher number of measured war deaths from the 20th century versus any other century is a testimony to the bellicose nature of technology and ideals of statism that circumvent or supersede any other notions of morality. Genocide as a practice became canonized in Nazi Germany, and its defeat came at the behest of the concerted efforts of millions of soldiers, Marines, seamen, and airmen from over 20 nations. The scope and scale of the war are necessary reminders of the cost of autonomy and the real price of the threat of extinction at the hands of autocrats and tyrants. The National Socialist ideals of 1930s Germany were the errant progeny of bastardized Nietzscheanism writ large, and the bill for that largesse was footed to the rest of the world. The lessons to be learned from the articles are to show the feeling of ultimate relief and elation that resulted from the destruction of the enemy of freedom. The articles declare Nazism and its fruits as the greatest evil ever produced by mankind, and that the destruction of those elements of humanity could usher in an era of peace, so long as the efforts of reconstruction of Europe were maintained and not forgotten or applied haphazardly. One of the most important elements these articles could clearly demonstrate is the scope and scale of the catastrophe that unified efforts both for and against tyranny can produce. B.H. Liddell Hart spoke at large about the utility and history of helping people avoid making the mistakes of their forebears, and here is a perfectly appropriate example of that idea. Kant's Perpetual Peace is a document that cites intervention as both a good and evil approach to affairs between nations, but in this case, earlier intervention could have saved millions of lives. Perhaps tomorrow's diplomats and policymakers can learn from the evocation of the emotions of terror and horror demonstrated in the relief of the collective sigh of the entire world when Germany was rendered null and capitulated by the German instrument of surrender and ultimately the Berlin Declaration. When we think about the role of historians and educators in teaching successive generations about history, we must remember that the greatest products of our labors are to be an informed populace which knows how to think rather than what to think, that is well versed in the art of discernment, and is able to draw reasonable and informed opinions in the wake of exposure to evidence. If we could teach people how they think and why that determination is important, then we have achieved our most sacred andragogical objectives. Seeing how humanity teetered over the precipice of oblivion at the hands of despots demonstrates tangibly why the preservation of autonomy is so important.